Welcome to a homegrown family podcast where we grow the produce and the kids. Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 12. Can't believe we're already that much past 10. But here we are. Tell you what, guys, podcasting is not as easy as you think it is. It takes a lot of time and dedication and a lot of editing effort, especially when you're an amateur like myself, and it takes a while. But here we are, just sitting in my spare room once again. I'm Joe Metler, your podcast host, and today we have my brother David joining us. And hi David.
Hi.
Hey, so we got a good run-of-the-mill topics here for you today. Give you a quick little overview. We're talking about just gardening stuff and more gardening stuff. So David is my younger brother right beneath me, and education-wise, he went to school for horticulture at NDSU. And I guess professionally, he's a sugar beet researcher. And then he also is a orchardist by hobby. So there you have it, folks. My brother and I can really kind of go back and forth on a lot of these topics all the time. So we kind of geek out once in a while. So hope you're here to kind of geek out with us a little bit. So I guess some of my big highlights here this past month for me is that in the beginning of July, I finally finished my rain barrel. So I have two 55-gallon barrels that are big blue barrels. I think they were used for chicken broth originally, and the guy I bought them from didn't clean them out first, so it's kind of stanky to start, to be honest with you. But we got these big barrels, so I got a 110-gallon capacity, and then just yesterday, 24th of July, I finally ran out of water. So we had a couple little spurts of rain here and there, 1/10 of an inch, but collecting off a good chunk of my roof, so it's kind of nice to see that kind of take place and actually that hard work kind of come to fruition and pay off. So I guess in terms of the rain barrel, I haven't had anything really negative about it. I guess it's kind of holding its water and everything. I have seen some people online say that you shouldn't use water from asphalt shingles off your house for watering your garden, but I don't really see why not. I mean, maybe there's some kind of bleaching happening there, but all the plants that are growing around my house look just as healthy. So the ones that are, getting them dripping on, or, where the water's all shooting out the spouts, grass looks good. So I'm just going to go with that. But anyway, so that's been going really well. I've had several meals of green beans that have been doing really well for me. So I think I'm going to have to do that one again next year. I always thought they take up too much space. And I only put them in like a 2-foot by 5-foot area, so 10 square feet or so, and I've gotten several meals, which is awesome. My carrots are doing really well. I've had 6 to 8 inch carrots. Basically, I'm going to harvest those as I go throughout the rest of the summer until I pick them all, as long as they don't bolt. What else I got? Oh, cauliflower. I got some cauliflower that's like a 6-inch head right now, somewhere around there. Looking really good. My mom actually texted me a picture. They were over in Europe and Germany and doing some vacationing, and she texted me a picture of this cauliflower that was the size of a basketball. I don't know, David. Did she send you the same picture?
I was actually there.
Oh, you were there
when she picked it. Yeah, and it was a rather large cauliflower head. It was a little spaced out, so I would have picked it a little earlier, but she was gone. So,
so that's a question for our audience. Is like, when do you pick cauliflower?
Right. So generally speaking, it depends on the variety a little bit probably, but I'm looking for something the size of a dinner plate, maybe that 10, 12 inches across. However, if it starts getting spaced out, I guess you'd call it, right, then you want to pick it before it starts flowering or something.
Yeah. So, the cauliflower head, it's all big one head. When it's nice and tight, if you start getting a little bit of spacing there in the different florets, then you want to kind of, as soon as you start seeing that, harvest it, because that's the time, right? Ideally, you'd harvest it before then, I guess, to get the ideal consistency on your cauliflower. So once you get that 10 inches, if it hasn't started flowering yet, then you may just want to go ahead and chop it off 10 inches. And so, yeah, that's been pretty exciting. I don't know, David, so keep in mind here before David start talking about his garden, because because remember, I'm a zone 3 and he's a zone 4, darn near zone 5, I think, if I remember right. So we're talking about the gardening zones again. I'll have to go back and listen to the Seeds and Such episode where we talk a little more about that or maybe I talk about it in my introduction. I don't remember. But I'm zone 3 in the USDA growing zones, and David's over in southern Minnesota at the zone 4. So he's probably laughing at me because he's probably been harvesting peppers for a month already. I did harvest my first couple peppers here the other day. Yeah, good fist size. I can't remember which ones they were, but they're tasting pretty good so far.
So I actually have not harvested any peppers other than I did give a neighbor a couple jalapenos, I guess. So yeah, I have normal gardens, just in the yard there. I don't have any raised beds like Joe has. And I have a 40 by 70 garden and then a 50 by 25 foot garden. So I have a lot of space to grow a lot of different things. So I have a lot of viney crops. I have squash, pumpkins, watermelon, cantaloupe. And I also have a lot of sweet corn, which I just picked my first sweet corn 2 days ago. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to getting some of that.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll be more ripe this weekend. Those couple of plants right on the edge always get a little more sunlight, a little more water. So generally speaking, those ones will just be a tish ahead of the rest of the row. So hopefully this weekend we'll have a bunch of sweet corn. But otherwise, what we've been picking lately, we harvested our garlic here maybe 2 weeks ago and had that hanging up to dry and had a pretty good yield on that. We also harvested, like Joe said, we've been doing green beans, cauliflower, been harvesting a lot of eggplant, carrots, pretty nice sized carrots too right now. I might start stealing potatoes out of the garden too if I need potatoes. So no point getting from the store now.
Yeah, and I mentioned it in a different podcast here early on is that I know this is my first year I ever had garlic. I had a couple cloves that were starting to sprout on me on my shelf that I bought from the store, so I shoved them in the ground and I put them in my raised garden bed. And then I got a couple cloves of garlic from David, which I think he got from my aunt, who's really big into garlic. And I'll probably have her on the podcast here maybe this fall as we talk about planting garlic. But and then so I put 4 of those cloves that David gave me just next to my driveway, but closer to my garage. Anyways, it's kind of a really shady spot, so it took forever, and that's also where I plow my snow into, so it took forever to get started. But I was kind of wondering, oh gosh, when do I harvest these things? And so I looked into when to harvest it, and I see blogs and Facebook groups and things like that. Actually, one thing to mention is that if you're not on a Facebook group for gardening for your area, it's a very good place to go and get resources for people asking questions. There's all sorts of questions that get asked, and so you probably have the same question. But so I was wondering, when do I harvest this garlic? And I'm like, oh, look at this on the gardening, Facebook page. They have everybody's asking, saying, hey, I just harvest my garlic. When should I harvest my garlic? And a lot of people around, well, I guess it was the Minnesota growers page, was saying that you can harvest your garlic when you see the first 2 leaves like basically browned off on the bottom, the 2 first bottom leaves. And they're kind of like, oh yeah, mid-July, early July, somewhere in that neck of the woods. And some others were like, hey, once the bottom third of all the leaves go down. So kind of probably depends a little bit. And you can always harvest one. And if it's kind of small yet, maybe you wait and harvest it a week later or something like that. But I did harvest my 2 ones that were in my raised garden bed because they're basically all brown because my marigold plant I planted next to it was too big. So I harvested those, and they're about the size you'd get from the store, honestly. So I thought that was about the right timing. And then the other ones I planted, I had one that was kind of starting to get covered up by one of my rhubarb plants too. I try to squeeze in as much as possible, you guys. And I've kind of talked about this. I do this layering thing, and so I my lower kale leaves are getting harvested, and so now I have like a foot without any kale on it. I'm gonna start planting lettuce underneath my kale, and that this heat of the summer sun in the middle of July, this kale's gonna be shading my lettuce, so hopefully it'll work really well that way. Anyway, so I had this rhubarb in the way, and so I harvested one of the other the other cloves that Dave gave me, and it was like the size of a peanut. It was so small. So I think I got some time to wait. I think I got the bottom leaf is kind of browning a little bit, but I'm thinking I'm going for a full bottom third turning brown. But I don't know, David. What has your experience been with the garlic?
Yeah, so again, just as a disclaimer, we are novices when it comes to garlic.
Not pros, not pros.
Not pros, yeah. So this is only my second year growing garlic. And as a true researcher, I went out and bought 6 different varieties so I could do an experiment and test them, right? So last fall, I got 6 varieties: Chesnok Red, German Porcelain, Northern White, Musik, Vietnamese Red, and Spanish Rojo. And so I just ordered these from a seed catalog company, and they gave me a half a pound of each variety. And I read the directions and planted them, at the right depth and everything, and spacing, and mulched them right in the fall. You got to give them a little insulation because we're in, northern climate here. These aren't necessarily winter hardy if they're exposed. But most of the hardneck varieties are winter hardy enough for us if you mulch them a little bit. It was very interesting. The Vietnamese Red and the Spanish, or Roja, I should say. Those two didn't overwinter as well for me. It might have not actually been the cold temperatures as much as maybe being over mulched, and we didn't actually have a cold winter. And I think they maybe started growing underneath the mulch and actually had some like stem rot or something that happened where it didn't survive being underneath the mulch that I used. But the other 4 varieties did pretty well, had pretty nice sized cloves. I did put on some urea fertilizer before it rained just to give them a little nitrogen, because I know garlic is a very shallow rooted crop. And so they need, I wouldn't say they need a ton of nitrogen, but they do need a higher amount of nitrogen applied, maybe at multiple times, just to help with that, because they can't really mine nitrogen in the soil like some of your root crops, like a beet would have a nice taproot to send down.
Yeah, and if you're not too into the chemical fertilizers or synthetic urea and stuff like that, you can put down some blood meal. That'd be a good one. I think it's like a 10-0-0 blood meal. It's a slow release, so you could probably put it on early in the season, and you'll kind of get a little bit of a slow release of nitrogen, release of your nitrogen there. Probably enough for the rest of the season, I imagine, depending on how much you put down. But
yeah, or use some manure compost in the fall when you plant. But yeah, so I guess, a little bit of your garlic size and stuff. So I was laughing a little bit when Joe was talking about his peanut garlic plant, and I'm thinking it's not going to get any bigger.
Wait, what?
So, it's probably more so the environment that it's in, right? It's in a bad spot, and
not getting a lot of sun. Yeah.
Not getting a lot of sun, not getting a lot of nutrients. It's probably what it is.
Yeah, probably.
So, a lot of it depends on the spacing. If you want to have larger garlic bulbs, you should really space them out, probably that 6-8 inches instead of some sites might tell you 4 inches, which is fine for a smaller bulb variety. But if you want large bulbs and large cloves, you should probably space them out a little bit more. They get shallow roots again, right? So they can't really mine a lot. So you don't want them stealing water from each other or nitrogen from each other. And then there's just some, variety differences in size too, right? So.
Yeah. So what was the biggest clove garlic that you planted?
Yeah. So out of the ones I planted, right, and there's lots and lots of varieties, just in hardneck garlic varieties, right? So there's your porcelain types. There's a purple striped.
You mentioned not twice now the hardnecked. So you have hardnecked and softneck garlic?
Yes, right. So when you go to the grocery store and you are in that area where there's onions and potatoes and garlic, right, all it ever says is garlic.
Yep.
So growing up, I always just thought there's just garlic. Most people probably don't realize that there's actually multiple different kinds of garlic and lots and hundreds of different varieties. And so what you see in the store is most of that softneck garlic, and that's, coming from somewhere that's warmer than where we're at here in Minnesota. Maybe it's California or wherever. But softneck garlic's generally not winter hardy. Hardneck garlic, on the other hand, is more winter hardy, and it actually has a stronger flavor, more pungent, I guess I would say, compared to the softneck garlic is generally It's just your standard garlic flavor, right? It doesn't have any other side notes of anything. Whereas a lot of these hardneck varieties, you can get different hints of, I don't know, different flavors, right? Or a little bit of heat even actually might be described. And one thing I guess I'd say is the soft neck generally stores longer from my understanding. So that might be why that's what's commercially used. And the hard neck doesn't store as long. I'd say maybe 2 months to 6 months if you store it well. And that's, putting it in a cool environment for temperature, but also lower humidity. So that will help it store longer and good air ventilation.
Yeah, so it's pretty much safe to say anybody in the North Dakota, Minnesota area, if you're going to plant garlic, make sure it's a hardneck garlic, basically.
Probably, yeah.
And after that, you can kind of do what David did and get a couple of different cultivars and try it out. So, drum roll here. David's best garlic of the year is?
Yes, right. I forget. So the Musik garlic probably had the largest cloves. And then the Germain Porcelain also had very large cloves. So pretty close second on that. The Chesnok Red and the Northern White that I had were, I'd say, medium-sized cloves. Not huge, but not small either. And then the Vietnamese Red and Spanish Roja that did survive, they were pretty small cloves. And I think, some of that's variety difference, but then also some of those were maybe planted a little closer together as far as the cloves, like the Chesnok Red. I had more cloves to put in the same amount of row feet, so I kind of just put them in a little closer too.
Yeah, so you mentioned hanging them up and curing them. Do you have a quick rundown of how you're doing that or how a person should do that?
Sure, yeah. There's probably a few different ways you could do that. First of all, I would say that prior to harvesting them, people generally remove the, I guess you'd call it a false flower head on the garlic, right? People call it a scape. It's not a true flower because it doesn't form seeds. It has little bulblets on them, so tiny little plants that it'll drop off, kind of like winter onions do. So it's not a true flower head. But anyway, I digress. When your false flower head curls and comes out over the top of the plant, it's a good time that you can actually harvest that and use it in different dishes.
Yeah, I actually harvested mine after David told me I could do that a couple of weeks back. And, man, I put them up in some mashed potatoes. That was great.
Yeah, stir fry. I'm sure there's all sorts of different options you could do that. It's pretty highly prized, actually. You could sell them at farmers markets and different things like that. And it's so it tastes great. It's a good thing that you could sell, but it's also, it takes nutrients and energy away from the bulb and the cloves that you're forming. So you want to remove it for that reason too. And so you'll do that, and then you'll start noticing maybe some of the lower leaves will start to brown or yellow. And generally that's an indicator that it's starting to reach the point where you might harvest, right? If the bottom third of the leaves are so. There's different opinions on that. Then you could harvest them. And generally what I did is that I tied them in groups of maybe 10, a dozen bulbs or so. And then I hung them upside down in my garage in a well-ventilated area to dry. What I've read is that you don't want them in direct sunlight because that could result in some off flavors or something. So you want to make sure it's not in a window or something like that. You could also spread them out.
So you're not washing these prior. You're keeping all the dirt kind of intact, just kind of rubbing the dirt off before hanging, or actually you're not washing them, sure.
No, you're not washing them. Basically, you just knock some of the big dirt off.
Yep.
But otherwise, you hang them up, they dry. Just leave everything on them, and then once they are up there for maybe 2 weeks or so, then what you would do is clip off the stem, get rid of that, and then I actually put mine in a kind of mesh cloth hanger, and so I put each variety in a different bag, basically. So now I have them separated.
Nice. Yeah, so that's garlic, I guess, for you. We'll talk a little bit more about planting here probably in the fall when we get closer to that activity. But maybe Dave will come back on board and kind of do a taste testing with us or something.
Yeah, maybe I'll bring some to you and you can do a taste test.
A live taste test? That wouldn't end well.
Raw.
Try a YouTube channel. That could be entertaining. So yeah, David has been seeing a lot of different pests out in his garden, but we're gonna go ahead and call it a wrap and talk about those on the next episode. So, I mean, eventually I'm probably just gonna have to start calling him a co-host or something. But
I don't know if I want to be in that much work.
And if you have any questions or anything, you can reach me at homegrownfam@gmail.com or on Instagram. And yeah, until next time.